All right, welcome. Thanks for joining the presentation. My name is Ryan Barba. As you might know, I'm a former MBA admissions officer. I worked at both Cornell and Keenan-Flagler at the University of North Carolina, collectively for about 5 years. And since that time, for the last 7 or 8 years or so, I've been advising MBA candidates who are looking to apply to the world's top business schools. And today, my presentation is entitled Top 10 Avoidable Mistakes That Sabotage MBA Applications, and of course, how not to make them. I'll tell you the inspiration for today's presentation, and that is seeing candidates over and over and over again make the same stupid, repeatable mistakes that sabotage all their hard work. It's so frustrating to me to watch candidates who have been working so hard over several years preparing for business school, working hard at work, working hard in their community, struggling through GMAT study, trying to increase their score 1 point at a time, working hard on their applications and coaching their recommenders, and then sabotaging their case by making stupid, easily avoidable mistakes. So the goal today is to quickly cover what those top mistakes are so that you can avoid sabotaging your chances if you have a legitimate chance of getting into a top tier school. Now, I'm trying to run today's presentation a little bit differently. Most webinars that I run are conducted live over about 90 minutes, sometimes 2 hours plus with a live Q&A, and we hold it as a live event. Not the case today. I'm pre-recording this, so I'm hoping that you can watch it at your own convenience. I'm also trying to keep things short. I'm hoping to get through today's presentation in about 30 minutes, and I'm trying to make it easy to just listen to. So certainly I have slides to facilitate the discussion in the presentation, so if you can watch the presentation, that's even better, but I'm trying to make this easily digestible so that you can listen to it on the go. And if you'd like the slides for the presentation, simply shoot me an email, ryan@ryanbarba.com, and I'd be happy to provide those to you. So, without further ado, about me, if you haven't listened to one of my other webinars in the past or seen me online, as I mentioned, I'm a former MBA admissions officer. I worked at both Cornell Johnson and UNC Keenan-Flagler in their MBA admissions department, collectively between the two for about 5 years. I am an MBA graduate myself. I went to Cornell on a full tuition scholarship. I'm now the director of MBA admissions at Ready4, where I lead a team of 15 MBA consultants, all from top tier schools. I'm a former senior consultant from Stacy Blackman Consulting, which is a large MBA admissions consulting firm. I've been featured dozens of times in sources like the U.S. News & World Report, Wall Street Oasis, and MBAprograms.com for my expertise in MBA admissions. Professionally, outside of the admissions game, I did work as a consultant for about 8 years, including at some of the big 4 consulting firms. And then total, I've advised more than 500 candidates to gain acceptance successfully to top 10 MBA programs. Over the last 8 years, I have a 94% success rate getting candidates into at least one top 10 program. And currently more than 40 students enrolled at Harvard Business School, Wharton, and Stanford GSB are past clients that I've worked with. I've had a lot of success over the years with candidates who have both strong candidacies and slightly not as strong candidacies. And I've included here some emails and success stories from past candidates that I've worked for. If you see the slides later, I'll allow you to go through these. But again, I believe in the power of a top-tier MBA degree. I see the transformation that it's made in my own life, in the lives of my classmates and people that I've met since. And then, of course, with the candidates that I've worked with and seeing how their careers have blossomed and grown by going to a top-tier business school. So if you're looking to apply to that top-tier level, I get it, I respect it, and I hope that today's presentation is going to help get you in the door for one of those top-tier programs. So, again, goal for today. I want to share what I feel are the most common, most damaging mistakes that MBA candidates make that sink their chances of admission, sabotaging all their hard work, especially when they're trying to go to a top-tier school where the margin for error is really slim, right? You just can't afford to be making stupid mistakes when you're applying to schools whose acceptance rates are 15% 10%, or Stanford where it's less than 6%, right? There's not much margin for error. You have to be almost perfect for a lot of these schools in terms of the quality of your application, which is not to say you can't have weaknesses, because you can, and candidates with weaknesses get in every year, but you really do have to ace the process. And the things that I'm going to cover today are ways that you can sabotage the process and do yourself some harm. Again, this is based on what I've learned from my more than 5 years working as an MBA admissions officer and my more than 8 years now advising MBA candidates to top-tier MBA programs. My hope is that you leave today's training feeling a little bit less stressed about the admissions process. Maybe you're kind of walking on eggshells, afraid to make stupid mistakes that are going to sabotage your chances. I'm hoping to teach you how to avoid some of those, and of course help you feel more informed about how to really crush the application process and gain admission to your dream MBA program. So, without further ado, if you're looking at the presentation, you're seeing a picture of David Letterman. Man, I miss David Letterman. He was awesome. He had his nightly top 10 lists. Those were usually pretty funny. So we're going to do this Letterman style. Although he usually went 10-1, we're just going to go in order. Okay, so first common mistake that top-tier MBA applicants make that sabotage their chances of admission is applying too early. And what I mean by this, it really takes a couple of different forms. First, applying a year or several years too early is a great way to sabotage your chances of success. Rule of thumb is that to get into a top-tier MBA program, you need at least 3 years of experience upon matriculation, meaning when you walk into the business school as a student. So at the very least, the very earliest you can apply is after you've accumulated 2 years of work experience, because again, you'll work during the year that you're applying, thereby walking in with 3. That is the bare minimum. For the vast majority of candidates, you probably want at least another year. The average years of work experience for a successful MBA candidate is in that kind of 4 to 5 range. So again, 3 years is possible, but a couple years more, it makes you even more competitive. So if you don't have 2 years of work experience yet, or you won't have 3 years of work experience when you start business school, you're too early. Go back and get some more experience before you apply if you want a legitimate chance. Again, this is for the top tier schools. There are lower ranked schools and online programs for which this is not the case, but if you're trying to get into the Harvards, Whartons, Stanfords of the world, this is definitely the case with very few exceptions. The other form in which you can apply too early is squeezing to meet earlier deadlines when you'd actually benefit from waiting. Now, most informed candidates know that your chances of success for a top-tier program are ever so slightly higher in round 1 than they are in round 2. So sure, if you've gotten all your application materials together, you've hit the ground running, you've allocated the time you need, and you're ready to apply in round 1, go for it. It's certainly advantageous to do so, to take advantage of that ever slight bump in your chances of success. But there are a lot of reasons and scenarios wherein it makes sense to wait for round 2. Right? So for example, most of the round 2 deadlines fall in January, right? So if you're getting a promotion in October or November, and that promotion won't appear on your resume if you apply in the round 1 deadlines, which typically fall in September, then wait. Wait until January where you have that great promotion to show off and brag about in your resume and applications. That's a really strong bump to your candidacy to show that you have a promotion. So if you're getting a promotion right before the round 2 deadline, wait for the round 2 deadline because you are thereby applying as a stronger candidate. I've also seen candidates rush to complete applications for round 1 when they haven't yet put in the time they need to get the GMAT or GRE score that they're capable of getting, right? So they're sitting on a 600. They know they could probably get up to a 700 with a little bit more study, but they're saying, you know what, I really want to get my application in for round 1, so I'm going to squeeze it in for round 1 and just apply with a 600. That's suicide. right? I mean, do some candidates get into the top tier schools with a 600 GMAT score? Sure, there might be a couple a year, but if you're not yet ready and you know that there's more upside potential to your current test score, wait. Give yourself the time to get the score that you need. So if you're sitting here in August or September and you know that, well, if I gave myself a few more months until October or November to study for the GMAT or GRE and I do much better, it's worth the wait for sure. Always better to apply in round 2 with an A+ quality application than in round 1 with a B+ quality application. So even if you feel like you'll have more time to study, better do the essays, better prepare your recommenders, or anything in between. If you're going to have a better candidacy in round 2, wait until round 2. Now, there is kind of a statute of limitations in that I would never apply round 3, or some schools even have a round 4. Strategically, that's suicide, right? You need to apply in round 1 or round 2 in most cases, unless you have a really, really good reason why you need to wait until round 3, in which case you should address that in your optional essay, because again, chances of success in round 3 or 4 are extremely low, especially compared to round 1 or 2. And for these more competitive programs, you want as much advantage as you can get. Okay, so that's mistake number 1, applying too early. Again, years before you should, or in round 1 rather than round 2, when applying round 2 would be strategically advantageous. Common mistake number 2, applying in round 3 or 4. I covered this already. Don't do it. It's just not smart. I know they exist for most programs. I think that most schools are going to start phasing them out. You want to apply in round 1 or 2 if you want to be a serious contender for a place in the class. Schools are very above board about this. They will flat out tell you if you legitimately want a chance of getting accepted, you want to apply in one of the first 2 rounds. Now, there are exceptions to this. There are some schools that have a round 2 deadline in the November-ish timeframe, and then their round 3 falls in January. For those few schools, I know Cornell does that, Kenan-Flagler does that, just so happens to be the 2 schools I worked for, then they are exceptions to the rule. So really the rule here is apply in the January deadline or earlier. Okay, so again, for most schools, the round 2 deadline is in January. There are a couple schools that have their round 3 in January, but if you're applying to business school in March or April, you're too late. And it might even be better to wait until the next year to have a legitimate chances of success. Now, do candidates get admitted in round 3 and round 4 every year? Sure. But are chances of success in those rounds significantly lower? You better believe it. Common mistake number 3, overestimating the impact or importance of your GMAT or GRE score. This can take one of 2 different forms. For most candidates, they assume, oh my goodness, I didn't quite hit the average for the school that I'm applying to, and therefore I have a 0.0% chance of success. That's bullshit. A school's average GMAT or GRE score is just that. It's an average, meaning that some people fall above that and some people fall below that. So just because you're slightly below the average score for a school doesn't mean that you have no chances of success, right? On the flip side, I've worked with a lot of candidates who are kind of lazily approaching the application process thinking, I get a GMAT score of, a 770 or something. I'm going to moonwalk into these schools without much effort. Absolutely not. These schools are competitive enough that every element of your application needs to be as stellar as it can be. So even if you're sitting on a 99 percentile GMAT or GRE score, don't lay on your laurels and just assume that this is going to be easier for you. You still need to crush the application process. So if you have a slightly below average GMAT score, don't fret, right? There are still opportunities for success if you really do crush the application process. Now, is there a limit to that? Sure. If you're sitting on a 2.7 GPA and a 500 GMAT score, chances that you're going to get into Harvard are zero, if not slightly above zero, right? So you certainly need to be reasonable and realistic in setting your expectations and use their scores, including their 80th percentile scores, right? The range in which 80% of their students fall, as a good guideline into where you need to fall to have a legitimate chance of success for your target programs, right? I'm not one of these snake oil salesmen that's going to pretend that you can get into Harvard with a 500 GMAT score. I rarely see it, right? You do need to be in a competitive range, but again, if you're slightly below average, that's okay. And again, on the flip side, don't get lazy if you have a stellar score. You still need to work really hard, ace the application process and ace the interview in order to get into business school. Okay, mistake number 4. Failing to apply to a range of schools. Most well-informed candidates apply to 4 to 6 programs, and my recommendation for every MBA applicant is to apply to a couple of reach schools, where maybe your scores and your GPA are maybe slightly below the average for those programs. A couple of schools where you have a really solid chance, where you know you're a legitimate candidate, and then maybe a safety school or 2. That, for me, is a balanced portfolio. So for every reach school you apply to, you should apply to another school in that middle band, right, where you have a really strong chance of success. Now, I've certainly worked with candidates who say, Ryan, I've made the decision that if I don't get into Harvard, Wharton, or Stanford, or maybe MIT, it's not worth me going back to business school. If I don't go to top 5, it's not going to be worth it. I think that might be true in very rare cases, but I believe in the quality of education for just about all the top tier programs. If you're really going in to learn and to broaden your network and your exposure to different academic disciplines in the world of business, you're going to get a great ROI from just about any of the top tier programs, if not all the top tier programs, depending on which ones, of course, are a good fit for you. Of course, that's a question you need to answer. You need to decide if it's worth going to a school ranked in the top 10 rather than in the top 3. But again, I think in most cases, if not all cases, if you go to any top 10 school, you'll be okay. And I do recommend a balanced portfolio and approach to the schools that you're selecting. Now, another reason to balance your portfolios of schools is that gaining multiple acceptances is actually really important. Because if you're able to secure multiple acceptance letters, you can leverage that in scholarship negotiations. Most candidates don't know you can do this and don't do it as a result. But if you have multiple acceptance letters, you can basically go to the schools that you've been accepted to and say, hey guys, highest bidder wins, right? So in other words, these schools are really cautious to protect what they call their yield, the percentage of candidates who accept their admissions offer. So in other words, if they accept 100 candidates and 98 of them enroll in the school, that looks really good. They accept 100 candidates and 10 of them enroll in the school, it looks really bad. And that statistic drives their ranking in sources like the U.S. News & World Report, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and all those other types of sources. So if a school offers you a spot in the class, they're on the hook to make sure that you go there. And if you get multiple acceptance offers, you can basically pit the schools against each other and say, hey, I like you, but I also get into this other school. Anything you can do to make the deal sweeter. And oftentimes they'll step forward with scholarship money. My team and I worked with 25 candidates last year. 24 of them were admitted to a top tier program, and more than 2/3 of them got significant scholarship offers, like more than $15,000 a year. And the vast majority of those offers came from this unknown negotiation practice. But again, it only works if you have multiple acceptances. So that's another great reason to balance your portfolio to ensure that you have another offer in your back pocket, even if you're applying to a top tier school, that you can leverage to try to negotiate scholarship offers. I really, really believe in that process. I've seen it work a million times. I've gotten really good at helping candidates negotiate scholarship amounts. But again, it speaks to the importance of balancing your approach when you're choosing the schools that you're applying to. Mistake number 5 is kind of related to that, and that is selecting schools based only on the rankings. Now, the rankings matter, right? The schools that are ranked highly for a reason. They are better in some ways than schools that are ranked lower, right? And there's all these different ways that these schools are ranked, and those rankings, again, have some relevance, but don't just pick schools based on their ranking. There are some top 10 schools that are a bad fit for you and where you are a bad fit for the program. And then there are some other top 10 schools where you're probably a much better fit and they're a much better fit for you, right? You need to think through the things that are really important to you when you're selecting a business school. And it can't be just the rankings, right? These schools really do have different environments and different cultures, right? Harvard Business School has a much different culture than does Kellogg or Tuck. Right? Some are really finance driven. They tend to attract really A-type personalities. Others are more collaborative. Some are larger, some are small, right? That's another question to think about. Do you want to be in a business school where you're meeting somebody new every day because you're in a class of thousands of people? Or do you want one where it feels more intimate in a smaller type community where you know just about every person in your class or your cohort, right? Those are important questions to ask. I mean, location, right? If you're somebody who's miserable in the cold, why in the world would you go to Tuck? If you're somebody who overheats and can't stand being in the heat, why in the world would you go to UCLA Anderson, right? These types of things are important too, because at the end of the day, a business school is somewhere you're going to spend 2 years of your life. And if you're not going to be happy there, then is it really worth your time, right? Go to a place where you're going to be able to learn comfortably, where you're going to feel comfortable at a place that feels like home, where you're going to be happy to study for a couple of years and get along with the other types of students that tend to go there. Okay, so really think through these different factors and don't make decisions based only on ranking. Recognize that these schools do have different value propositions to you as a candidate and choose the ones that are the best fit for you. I mean, when I'm working with candidates on school selection, that's a pretty detailed conversation. We'll talk sometimes up to an hour about the different programs and what they offer and what distinguishes one from the other. It's a very important decision and a very detailed conversation. So really recognize those differences when you're choosing the schools to apply to. Mistake number 6, not planning ahead for the GMAT or GRE. It is impossible for me to tell you how long it will take you to get a GMAT or GRE score that is in range for the top tier schools. For some candidates, it takes a couple of months. I hate those people because that was not me. For me, it took many more months than a couple of months. Some people need up to a year. Some people need more than that, right? It depends on how good a test taker you are and your own bandwidth and how much time you have to study every day or every week. There's a million different variables that drive how long it's going to take you to get the score you need. So plan ahead, right? Your GMAT score is good for 5 years. Right? So if you have an easy month at work where things are kind of slowing down or any other reason, like why not get a jump on your GMAT score or your GRE prep? I've worked with so many candidates who are up against deadlines. They're trying to meet the round 1 or round 2 deadline. They didn't plan far enough in advance for the standardized tests, and they're trying to get the score at the last minute and balancing that with application prep. And that's just reality for some people who just didn't have the time to study in advance, or maybe they didn't know they wanted to go to business school until the year before, whatever. But if you can, plan ahead. Give yourself the time you need to really do well on the exam. I really do believe that the GMAT and GRE are exams that with enough study you can do better on. They're different than the SAT that way, where you just kind of tend to fall where you fall. With enough consistent study, you will see an increase on your score in most cases. And I'm a good case study of that, where with enough studying, I was able to improve my score by 120 points. It wasn't fun, but I got there. But it required a lot of time. So again, because you can't predict how long it'll take you to get the score you need, give yourself extra time just in case. And hey, if you get the score earlier than you thought you would, great. Again, you can keep the score for 5 years, so why not plan ahead? Why clog the admissions process by trying to do all of your applications while having to study for the GMAT or the GRE at the same time? Because mistake number 7 is that candidates underestimate just how much time the MBA applications require. Remember that each of these schools has their own set of essay questions, and while there is some overlap between some programs, most schools have their own unique essay questions. Typical school asks between 2 and 5 essays ranging from 250 to 750 words. Harvard has their unlimited word essay, right? So Each of these schools requires a lot of attention. When I'm working with candidates on their MBA applications, a single essay may go through 5 to 7 drafts before it's final and complete, and it takes some thinking and strategizing and editing over several weeks. Right? So if you're sitting a month before the round 2 deadlines, for example, and you haven't started your applications and you think you're going to apply to 5 schools, you're crazy. I mean, you might do it, but the quality of your application is not going to be what it should be. Generally speaking, allocate about 3 or 4 weeks per application, at least for the first few schools, if you have a 40-hour-a-week job and can allocate a few evenings or weekend days to applications each week. Again, everybody has their own schedule and their own availability and bandwidth to do the process. And give yourself more time than you think you'll need, because candidates are consistently surprised in learning just how intense and time-intensive the MBA application process really is. Mistake number 8, failing to get to know your target schools. Go out there and really explore the schools that you're applying to, right? You should go on campus, sit in on a class, meet some other students. Ask yourself, right, is this a place where I would be comfortable? Interacting with schools is a great way for you to have that gut check, right? It's easy to just read about a school and be impressed, or even see a presentation at an info session and be impressed. But going to campus and actually experiencing it is quite different. So if you can, and I know in some cases it's impossible, but if you can, visit the schools you're applying to, get yourself on campus, and really be honest with yourself about whether this is a place you belong or not. Having some interaction with the schools through these info sessions that they hold at these MBA forums, going to campus, speaking with professors, speaking with students or alumni. These are all really strong interactions that are going to elevate the quality of your essay or your interview response when they ask you, why do you want to go to school here? Right? You don't want to settle for generics on that question, as I'm going to talk about in a little bit. You want to be really specific about why you want to go to a particular program. And it's easiest to do that if you've had some interaction with the program itself. So it's just going to elevate the quality of your application, as well as elevate your comfort level that the school is a good fit for you if you've taken the time to really get to know the schools. Additionally, some schools do track who's made an effort and who hasn't, especially schools that have had a traditionally lower yield, right? Again, the percentage of accepted candidates who accept their position in the class. They really want to make sure that you're interested, right? They're worried about your being accepted and then not accepting your place in the class. So it's important for those schools to really make an effort and show that you're interested, right? So these schools will actually track, in many cases, who they've talked to, who's reached out, who's visited campus. Some schools don't, but schools ranked in like the 7 to 15 and above range, they typically do, right? So it's important to visit these schools and get to know them, again, for your own benefit, for the quality of your essays, and for their chances of success in general if you're applying to a school where it's important to them that you go and experience the campus. Mistake number 9, using generic arguments in telling a school why you want to go to school there. When I was working in admissions, I read thousands of essays of candidates who said, I really want to go to school here because of the collaborative culture, the friendly students that I met, and I don't know, the finance program, right? You could say that about literally every business school. Be really specific, right? Talk about the classes that you're really excited to take with the professors that you've gotten to know or studied and gotten to know their work, or the specific academic disciplines or structures and programs that they have, the clubs that they have that are really unique to that particular school, the different events that they have that they're known for, the culture itself, the experience, again, that you had on campus. Like, really be specific about why a school is your top choice. You want to convince every school that you're applying to that they're your top choice, right? Which means that if you apply to 5 schools, technically you're lying to 4 of them, but they don't know that. You want to be compelling and convincing in telling every school that you apply to that they are your top school, and have really solid reasons for explaining why that is. Use enthusiastic language, show some spirit and excitement when talking about why you want to go to that school, especially in your interview. And as a consultant by training, again, I worked in strategy consulting for years, I believe in the power of a 3-pronged argument, which means you should have 3 solid reasons you're telling a school why you want to go there. Really, really be clear about what those things are that separate that school from all the other top tier business schools, and avoid generics as much as you can. And then finally, number 10, failing to think through your unique brand and story. This is related to candidates who do a great job on the GMAT or GRE and decide that they're just going to kind of sit back and skate into business school without really thinking through their strategy or really crushing the application process and the essays. This is a marketing exercise, the MBA application process. Your goal is to paint yourself as a one-of-a-kind applicant. You want to separate and distinguish your application and your candidacy from everybody else who's applying to that program. So your goal is not just to become qualified, but to show how you're better, different, and unique. You want to be a standout candidate. In other words, as I always explain it, you need a brand. You need to brand yourself in a specific way to differentiate yourself from the competition, other candidates who are applying to that school. I mean, my experience has taught me that what separates success stories from unsuccessful stories, if you want to call it that, are the candidates who really think through their strategy. They really want to understand and really think through, what is my opportunity to differentiate myself? What is my story? What is the case that I'm making to these schools for why I'm better, frankly, than all the other schools I'm applying to? You're not just trying to show a school that you're good enough. You're trying to show the schools that you're better than other applicants, okay? That's really, really important. So as you're thinking about this process, don't think in the mindset of, what do I need to do to become good enough to get in the door? It's, what do I need to do to really outshine all the other applicants and earn my way into the class? Think about it this way. Of all the applicants that apply to a top tier school, in my experience, about 80% of applicants are actually qualified, right? They have the scores, they have the GPA, they have enough work experience. They kind of meet the minimum standard, and they'll get a strong look from the schools that they're applying to. The trick, though, is how do you differentiate from the other people in that 80%? How do you become part of that 20% or 15% or 6% that are actually accepted, right? The trick is differentiating yourself from everybody else who's qualified for business school, and that's why you need a brand. That's why you need a strategy. Again, I'll be clear here. Your GMAT or GRE score, your GPA, those things matter, but quants get way too much attention and emphasis from applicants who are just trying to show that they're good enough. Your goal is to show that you're better than and differentiate your brand, right? Telling a top-tier MBA school that they should admit you because you're qualified would be like a car manufacturer telling you to buy their brand because their cars come with working engines, right? It's like you can think through these like really generic fake advertisements like the ones I'm showing you here. And if you're listening, I have a picture of a Jaguar with an ad that says, our cars come with a working engine included. Or a fancy watch company saying, hey, with our watches, you'll always know what time it is. Or the Ritz-Carlton saying, every one of our rooms has a bed, right? These are obviously very ineffective marketing campaigns, but they're silly, stupid examples, fake examples of companies showing that they're meeting the minimum standard, right? That is not your goal. You really want to differentiate yourself from the competition, from the other applicants. So that's my top 10 list. Again, if you want the slides from today's presentation, I'm happy to provide them to you really quickly. If you do need some help in creating your strategy, how you're going to brand yourself, and help with the application process itself. Again, I am an MBA admissions consultant. I have a team of MBA consultants that work with me, all of whom went to a top-tier school, many of whom have direct MBA admissions office experience, and all of whom have been working with candidates for several years. We take on a small number of candidates every year. Every consultant on my team only takes on 2 or 3 a year. And again, our success rate over the last 7 years or so working together is 94% success, getting into at least one top tier school. So we'd love to work with you. There's a link below this video if you're interested in learning more, where you can have a free consultation with me. We can talk about your candidacy. I can answer any questions you have about business school and getting into business school, and then we can see if there's a mutual fit between us and see if it makes sense for you to work with me and my team in your MBA applications. Okay, that's it. Hope this was helpful. Again, if you want the slides, it's ryan@ryanbarba.com. If you want a consultation, click the link below. Otherwise, I'll see you next time you chime into my next presentation, whatever that'll be. Have a great day and take care.